This is a case.
It was just 10 seconds before my 15-year-old daughter was to be cremated. The sound of police sirens filled the air, and several officers appeared before us. As I stood there in shock at the sudden turn of events, an unexpected person began trembling violently, their face pale as a ghost. Why is this person so shaken? Soon after, I learned the real reason why my daughter left this world and who was responsible for it. Overwhelmed by shock and anger, I vowed revenge and resolved to take action. This decision would lead to a life-altering event that changed the course of my life forever. I am Nancy, 40 years old. I met my husband, Jason, who is 2 years younger than me, through a mutual friend, and we eventually got married. After that, our daughter Emma was born, and the three of us lived happily together as a family. Even after getting married, I continued to work as a teacher at a middle school. Though I wasn't a homeroom teacher that year, I was put in charge of the girls' volleyball team due to my past experience as a student, which kept me busy every day. To be honest, balancing work and family was challenging at times, but my students adored me, and I found the work fulfilling. There was another reason why I worked so hard. My husband, unfortunately, had a weak constitution and often fell ill, making it difficult for him to hold down a full-time job. After numerous job changes, Jason eventually gave up on finding employment and became a stay-at-home dad. This meant that my income alone had to support our household. However, thanks to Jason taking care of everything at home, I was able to work with peace of mind. Our daughter, Emma, suffered from severe asthma and had been in and out of the hospital since she was little. Jason often had to take her to the emergency room during late-night asthma attacks. Jason, I'll take her to the hospital tonight. You should rest.
Nancy, you have work early tomorrow. Leave it to me.
He would say that with such kindness, never showing any sign of frustration, always taking care of our daughter. I was always grateful for my gentle and devoted husband. As Emma grew older, her stamina increased, and her symptoms gradually improved. By the time she was ready to enter elementary school, her asthma attacks had almost entirely subsided.
Mom, I'm all better now. I have so many friends at school, and it's so much fun.
That's wonderful, Emma. You couldn't attend kindergarten much, so I'm glad you're enjoying school. Emma was overjoyed to be able to go to school and attended every day with a bright, happy spirit. However, even as I watched her with such joy, my husband's expression remained oddly grim. I chalked it up to his usual anxious nature. You're worrying too much. The doctor said that as long as the attacks don't return, she can live a normal life, right?
Yeah, that's true, but...
Jason adored Emma, but he was overly protective, and this had always been a concern for me. He was meticulous about disinfecting everything Emma touched and would immediately give her medicine if she even so much as coughed. Don't you think it's a bit too early to give her medicine? Maybe you could wait a little and see?
What are you talking about? What if it gets worse and something irreversible happens?
Jason shot me a sharp glare.
I know Emma best. Nancy, please don't interfere.
Whenever it came to Emma, Jason's whole demeanor would change, becoming so intense that it sometimes worried me. But the truth was, no one knew Emma's health better than Jason did. Thinking about that, I couldn't argue any further. Then, just when we thought Emma had fully recovered, something strange happened. She suddenly started experiencing dizziness and would collapse to the ground, and some mornings, she was too fatigued to get out of bed. These worrying symptoms began to appear more frequently. Despite running a full range of tests, no clear cause was found, and with no signs of her asthma, even the doctors were baffled. She was so full of life, and now she's suddenly so unwell. While I was filled with concern, Jason eagerly took charge of caring for her. But as I watched him, a strange feeling of unease began to stir within me. One day, I found a lighter under the kitchen exhaust fan. I immediately knew it belonged to my husband because he used to be a heavy smoker. Have you started smoking again? You quit for Emma's asthma treatment. Even if you're smoking under the exhaust fan, it's not good for her.
Stop nagging me. I'm stressed out from taking care of the house and looking after Emma. She hasn't had an attack in ages, so it's fine.
It was clear that he was upset because I had caught him smoking secretly. Jason clicked his tongue in frustration, his face flushing red with anger. I was shocked to see this different side of my husband, who had always been so gentle and kind. It was like he was a completely different person, someone I didn't know. I felt scared. Seeing him like this made me suddenly anxious. Emma's condition didn't improve, and she started going in and out of the hospital again. As a result, she became more withdrawn and depressed.
I was finally able to go to school, but now I'm sad that I can't see my friends.
Don't worry, Emma. Daddy's here for you. We'll work hard so you can go back to school.
Jason became more devoted to Emma's care, almost as if he was thriving in this role. He took on most of the responsibility for her hospital stays and doctor visits, earning high praise from everyone around him.
Today at the hospital, I told the nurse that I've been keeping a journal of Emma's care, and she complimented me.
Oh. Jason had been meticulously documenting Emma's condition and health in a notebook ever since she was diagnosed with asthma. You mentioned it just to get praise, didn't you? I couldn't shake the feeling of unease as I watched Jason, who seemed so pleased with himself. Emma's symptoms continued to fluctuate, and we remained stuck in a cycle of treating her without ever discovering the root cause of her illness. 8 years passed, and before I knew it, Emma had turned 15. She was still in and out of the hospital and could barely attend school. However, Emma was always positive and never gave up hope.
I don't want to fall behind everyone else.
She worked hard at her studies despite everything. One day, she was in an especially good mood, smiling as she gazed out the window.
I want to go outside and breathe in some fresh air today.
That sounds great. You need to soak up some sunshine and recharge. Usually, Emma stayed indoors out of concern for sudden changes in her condition, so I was delighted to hear her say that. However, Jason frowned.
No, she can't. Even if she seems fine, Emma is still sick. There's no way she should go outside.
It's just for a little while. She's really energetic today.
Fine. Do what you want.
Seeing how healthy Emma seemed, Jason couldn't argue anymore and stormed off to his room, sulking. Why does he insist on treating her like she's so fragile? I don't think it's necessary. So, I took Emma outside, and we went for a short walk around the neighborhood. For the first time in a long while, she stepped out of the house, squinting up at the sun and stretching as she soaked up the light, looking so happy. I'm sorry, Emma, for making you feel lonely while I was always at work.
Well, I'd be lying if I said I never felt lonely.
Seeing her lower her head and stare at the ground for a moment made my heart ache with guilt. But then she looked up and gave me a bright smile.
But you know, it's my dream to become a teacher like you, Mom. I want to teach kids in hospital schools who can't go to regular school because they're sick, just like I was.
Her clear eyes met mine as she spoke, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest, making my eyes well up with tears. Emma wants to follow in my footsteps. I'm so glad I've kept up with my work. I felt a deep warmth inside as I spent this precious, happy moment with my daughter. But the next day, something unbelievable happened to us. Emma suddenly fell ill, and I received a call from Jason saying she had to be hospitalized immediately. I couldn't help but remember the sad expression Emma had shown the day before. I want to be by her side. I'll leave school early and head to the hospital.
I understand how you feel, but I'm with her, so it's okay. The doctor said it was just a precautionary hospitalization. There's no need for you to rush over.
Reassured by Jason, I decided to go to Emma after my classes were done. But just a few hours later, I received the news I never expected. Emma's condition had suddenly deteriorated, and she had passed away. No. This can't be true. It must be a mistake. I rushed to the hospital, but even as I faced Emma, I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was in a nightmare, standing there in shock. It was impossible to comprehend. After all, she had been smiling and full of life just the day before. To make matters worse, the doctors said they didn't know what caused the sudden change in her condition. They suggested an autopsy to determine the cause of death.
Emma has been fighting illness since she was little. We can't let them cut her body open after everything she's been through.
Jason was in tears, adamantly opposed to the idea. Although part of me wanted to know the cause, I ultimately decided to respect Jason's wishes. You're right. Let's send her to heaven with her body untouched. And so, we proceeded with the funeral as planned. On the day of the service, Emma's classmates attended, and I was grateful that she had managed to make friends despite rarely being able to go to school. After the ceremony, we went to the crematorium with our relatives.
Emma, please don't leave me.
As the time finally came, Jason clung to the coffin, sobbing uncontrollably. Those around him, who had witnessed his dedicated care for Emma, offered him their sympathy, many shedding tears alongside him. Just as Emma's body was about to be placed in the furnace, a loud siren blared, stopping abruptly right outside the venue. As the crowd began to murmur in confusion, several police officers rushed in.
This is potentially a criminal case. We need to perform an autopsy. Stop the cremation immediately.
One of the officers shouted, breathless. The urgency in his voice was palpable, but I was completely bewildered by the mention of a criminal case. The air of sorrow quickly turned to shock and confusion for everyone present. What's going on? Jason, what's happening? I asked in a panic, but Jason was pale and trembling uncontrollably. Jason, are you okay? Get a hold of yourself. I shook him gently, and it was only then that he seemed to snap back to reality, finally meeting my eyes.
I'm sorry. I just got really scared.
After being called over by the police, Jason was informed that Emma's doctor had contacted them, suspecting foul play in her death. The police, fearing the body would be cremated before they could investigate, had rushed to the scene. As a result, Emma's body was taken for an autopsy. We were told it would take several days for the results, and because of the ongoing investigation, the police couldn't provide us with any further details at that time. We were left in a state of confusion. Does this mean Emma was murdered?
Yeah, but what I'm more concerned about is how long these several days are going to be.
From that moment on, Jason seemed distant, barely responding to anything I said, and he was constantly anxious, fixated on when the test results would come back. How can you be so indifferent when our daughter might have been murdered? Jason's behavior troubled me deeply, but there was nothing I could do except wait for news from the police. And then, 3 days later, we finally received the results. The cause of Emma's death was determined to be a drug overdose, and the authorities were investigating the hospital staff involved.
Does this mean it was the hospital's fault? How could they do this to Emma? I won't forgive them.
Jason, calm down. We don't know for sure yet. Jason, who had been lifeless and despondent until then, suddenly became very vocal and animated. I couldn't help but feel suspicious of this sudden change in behavior. Jason was the only one who managed Emma's medication. Could he really be the one responsible? For a brief moment, I doubted my husband. But recalling his devotion and care over the years, I quickly dismissed the thought. Just then, a package arrived for me. The sender was Emma, and it turned out to be a birthday present she had arranged to surprise me with. When did she manage to do this? According to Jason, Emma had secretly arranged for the gift to be delivered to our home to surprise me. As I held the mug she had chosen for me, knowing how much I loved coffee, tears began to flow uncontrollably. I noticed a letter was attached, and on the envelope, it read,
"This is embarrassing, so please read it alone."
That's just like her, I thought with a smile. I took the letter and went to Emma's room to read it alone. But as I read, I was struck by its shocking contents, causing my hands to tremble and a chill to run down my spine. If this is true, I will never forgive it. With newfound resolve, I decided to take action. Finally, Emma's body was returned to our home. Welcome home, Emma. You really got me with that birthday surprise. Thank you. I've received your final message too. As I tearfully caressed my daughter, Jason stood beside me, shoulders shaking as he wiped away his own tears.
Emma, what was the last message you sent to Mom? You said it was just between you two, and you wouldn't tell Dad.
As Jason lovingly gazed at our daughter and spoke to her, I silently watched him. With Emma now back home, we proceeded with her delayed cremation. During the ceremony, I decided to read her letter aloud. I want our family to hear Emma's final words.
I understand how you feel, Nancy. But couldn't you have at least told me what it says beforehand?
Jason seemed a bit irritated that I insisted on keeping the letter's contents a secret until the day of the ceremony. But even so, I remained steadfast in my decision. And then, the moment arrived. As I began reading Emma's words of gratitude to me, I could hear the soft sounds of sobbing among our relatives. My husband, too, nodded deeply, pressing a handkerchief to his eyes. Glancing at him, I continued reading the letter. But as I moved on to the next part, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Everyone's eyes widened in shock, and expressions of disbelief spread across their faces. And it was no wonder why. What I read out loud revealed the horrifying truths of what my husband had done to our daughter. During her hospital stay, when Emma had said,
"I want to get better soon and go back to school,"
Jason had replied,
But if you stay sick, you can be with Daddy all the time.
Emma wrote about how much she hated hearing those words, how her father's mood would sour whenever she showed signs of improvement, so she pretended to feel worse than she did. At the end of the letter, she even confessed that she had come to believe she wasn't allowed to get better, and this had deeply saddened her. It was clear that this letter was Emma's SOS to me. Suddenly, the husband who had been crying just moments before turned to me with a pained expression.
None of that is true. Emma had a wild imagination, and she made it all up.
He shouted, his voice filled with anger.
It's ridiculous. What kind of parent would want their own child to stay sick?
As Jason's anger became more and more apparent, I confronted him with a certain fact. I read your caregiving journal.
What? You read that? How dare you go through someone else's notebook without permission?
Jason stammered, sweat beading on his forehead, clearly agitated. I had found his journal hidden deep inside a drawer at home. From what I read, it's clear that you were deliberately trying to keep Emma sick. I said. What do you mean? What you read? I was just noting her condition and the medication she took each day. He protested, his eyes darting nervously. Without a word, I handed him the caregiving journal, holding it out right in front of him. You deliberately reduced the prescribed dosage and gave it to Emma, didn't you? No wonder she never got better.
You think I trust the amount of medication the doctors prescribed? I've been taking care of her all this time, so I know what the right dosage is.
Jason responded, justifying his actions with a selfish rationale that left me appalled. And that's not all. You also gave her your blood pressure medication, didn't you?
Who knows what you're talking about?
He muttered, evasively. That's why she was dizzy and couldn't get up in the morning. You knew that medication could strain her heart, didn't you? Jason's face turned pale as he listened to my accusations. Why did you want so badly to keep Emma sick? What was the point? At this, Jason smirked, fully revealing his true nature.
Yeah, it's all true. Everything written in that letter. I couldn't work, so at first, I had no choice but to take care of her because of her asthma.
Everyone in the room froze, stunned by this sudden change in Jason's demeanor.
But then everyone praised me. They all said how admirable it was for a father to take care of his sick daughter. It felt good. And it was easier too. I didn't have to work as long as I was looking after her.
So when you said you couldn't work because of your health, that was a lie? You're nothing but a lazy fraud. I exclaimed, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Jason slouched back into a chair, crossing his legs, a smug expression on his face.
But then, she started getting better, and that wasn't good for me. I couldn't let that happen, so I made sure she stayed sick.
As I listened to him speak so casually about such horrific acts, I trembled with disgust and anger. It became clear that Jason deserved the most severe punishment. Emma died because you gave her an overdose of your own medication, didn't she?
That's right. I didn't think what I had was enough, so I bought additional drugs online. But I guess I gave her too much this time.
He admitted, his words so chilling that they seemed unreal.
And everyone was so stupid that they pitied me after she died. They all praised me for taking care of her until the end. It was the perfect ending.
Jason said, grinning as he recalled how people had unwittingly validated his twisted actions. Everyone in the room was speechless, dumbfounded by his selfishness. Then, suddenly, Jason lunged at me.
All that stuff I just said, it won't matter if there's no evidence left. Nancy, hand me that caregiving journal right now.
Stop it. I shouted, but it was too late. Jason snatched the notebook from me, a triumphant look on his face as he pulled a lighter from his pocket. He set fire to the crucial evidence, the caregiving journal, and watched as it burned.
I knew restarting smoking would come in handy someday.
Jason said, smiling as he watched the notebook burn, the flames dancing in the air. I stared at him with a cold, unyielding gaze.
What's with that look?
He asked. Unfortunately for you, the notebook you burned is a fake. I anticipated this might happen and handed the real one over to the police. Jason's movements froze, and his expression darkened. Panic started to set in on his face.
What? You're saying this isn't mine? No, that can't be true.
Unlike you, I don't lie. The police should be on their way here now, and I've recorded this entire conversation. I replied. Jason looked at me with a desperate, almost tearful expression.
Nancy, listen to me. I loved Emma. That's why I took care of her. I never meant to take her life.
No, you didn't do it for her. You did it because you enjoyed the praise. You used your own daughter just to make yourself feel good. I responded firmly, rejecting his feeble attempts to plead with me.
Think about this, Nancy. If I get arrested, don't you think it'll break Emma's heart? No child would want their father to be a criminal.
That's not true. I shouted, pulling out Emma's cell phone and showing the screen to Jason. On the screen was a video of Jason yelling at Emma.
You're sick. You don't need to get better.
Emma had secretly recorded it, perhaps in an attempt to one day expose her father's true nature. And you think she admired you? Don't be ridiculous. She was terrified and only obeyed out of fear.
She repaid my care by betraying me. What a terrible kid.
Jason muttered, his selfishness enraging me to the core. Don't you dare. Emma did nothing wrong. I will never forgive you. I'll make sure all the evidence goes to the police, and you'll pay for every crime you've committed. Jason's bravado crumbled as the reality of the situation hit him.
No! I can't survive in prison.
He whimpered, collapsing to the floor as his strength gave out. He lay there sobbing uncontrollably, and I decided to deliver the final blow. I'm divorcing you. And I'll be demanding alimony. You'll pay it all in one lump sum before you're arrested. You'll be penniless when you go to prison.
I never thought you could be so cruel.
Jason muttered as he looked up at me. I could say the same to you. I never thought you could be such a despicable human being. I responded, leaving him speechless. It was then that the police arrived, and Jason was dragged out and placed into the patrol car. Afterward, my husband was arrested and charged for his crimes. The evidence I provided played a crucial role, and it seems he'll be facing severe punishment. As I declared, I divorced him and demanded $50,000 in alimony. It turns out he had a secret savings account in his name, so I was able to collect the full amount in one lump sum. With my newfound freedom, I decided to honor my daughter's memory by resigning from my previous teaching job. I decided to become a teacher in a hospital school, a dream Emma could never fulfill. I believe she's watching over me from heaven, proud of the new path I've taken. How did you find today's story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.